to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do we have any disclosures of interest from the board? Then we'll look at the previous board minutes, review and approve the previous board minutes.
Move approval, Anderson.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Review the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda, pulling item 2 off
For the consent
for
agenda.
the consent agenda.
Okay, Mr. Arneson?
There are no changes.
There are no changes. All right, and we have a motion to pull number 2 from the consent agenda.
Do we need a special motion for that, or?
You can do it with the agenda, but
Should
you
do
do
it
need,
with the agenda.
you do need a second.
Yep.
All right. Well, I'll move to accept the agenda, pulling number 2 from the consent agenda.
Okay, a motion made and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We'll move on to the consent agenda, pulling number 2 out.
Move approval of 1, 3, 4, and 5.
Second.
Second, motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Item number 2, approve the policing contract rates for 25 through 27. Mr. Anderson.
Well, I had, as most of you all know, I had issues with this before, and I still have issues with this. And in one of the recent articles in one of the newspapers I read, that it is a 6% levy increase for one of our towns. And, well, we're here talking about trying to control our levy increase and then just shifting stuff to towns. I just have a problem with it. I don't know what the exact solution is. It's obviously not going as high as we have proposed here for me to accept it, but those rates, I just can't go there. It's just too much. And quite frankly, none of those towns are in my district. They have, but we're shifting that cost, and they're already paying for the levy for the sheriff, for that officer, and then paying 100% for that officer when he's in their town. And it's too much. And it's not any different than the SROs for me, because I really support that, and I think we should support that at a higher level. And that's where I'm at. And I could accept the lower number, but I can't accept that number.
Okay. Mr. Kelly, would you have any comments on this?
Well, I do. We've spent an inordinate amount of time, per the board's wishes, to figure out our actual deputy costs, which we did last year, and honestly, all we did was take your formula from last year for the city of Goodhue and just added our increases. And the reason we went with 3 years is because we were asked if we could do a 3-year contract like we used to from some of the towns, and that's why we projected out those numbers. Yes, they're extremely high, and I'm with Brad on it, but those are the numbers essentially that the board wished us to propose to the city. So now we're trying to get, everybody's doing their budgets, and we need to get a contract to them so they can figure out their budget, and sooner than later.
Just one other point, and somebody can probably correct me, but didn't we put the raise in after the cities had approved their preliminary levies last year? We didn't do that raise until later in the year, did we?
I think that was only with the city of Goodhue. Is
But
that
we
correct?
had proposed, we had said where we were going.
Correct.
We did, but their preliminary levy, I think, was in advance of that.
And just for Goodhue. But now everybody's is coming due.
Yes, go ahead.
I do understand what you're saying, and admittedly, getting up to $93 an hour is a lot of money. But again, we also have employees that we put on a new pay scale, so that's costs more. We also are on a maintenance plan where every year something's going to be adjusted and the costs go up. Again, we also have employees that are looking at retention and want to know what we're going to do to take care of them. So I do see that that cost is something that is going to pay for those things.
I don't agree, or I do agree with all of what you said. I think there's a real value for us having officers in those towns. I just really think there's a value to the county for that. And I get that, Kenyon or Zumbrota or Cannon Falls or Red Wing has their own police force. I understand they're paying for that on their own. And that is a choice that they're making. And this is just one that sticks in my craw. And I have a value system that says I'm not going down that road. And that's my value system. And I can't, it's worked for 9.5 years on this board. It worked for 12 years on a township board. It worked for 6 years on a school board. My value system hasn't changed. This one really sticks in my craw. So if it goes through like this, it's a no vote for me, and that's fine. Make that decision. I'll live with it. But I couldn't let it go without me reiterating it goes against my value system.
All right, so then do I understand it that you're saying then by raising the levy, then we get the whole county to help pay for that? Because if the cost is the cost, somebody's got to pay it.
I
And
agree.
I
I agree,
also-
and I think there's a value to the whole county to have officers in those cities. So that's what I'm saying. You
All right.
maybe view that differently than I do, and I understand that. I view it that there's a value for us to have officers spread out in our county. They're not always, they're going to be on call, and I can speak to that to a resident who called me, who was waiting for the police to get there, our sheriffs to get there. But it was a long wait. Had they been in one of those towns closer, it wouldn't have been that long. There's a value to it that I see that others aren't seeing the same way. And that's fine. I said, if this is the rate it's going to be, then you probably have the votes to do it. I'm just telling you it's a no vote for me. And you're not going to get me off that. I'll just tell you that.
Okay.
Because I have a value system that says I can't do that.
Okay.
Mr.
So-
Chair.
Go ahead, Marty.
So just a couple comments from me on it, because we've heard it from some of our towns, and a couple of them are here as we speak. But we very well, if this gets adopted, we very well may lose one or two of our contract towns. And that would be not good. But what that could also mean is we now, after our 2020, never find anybody to hire, we're up to speed right now. I don't want to have to see us lay off anybody, because that could possibly be an issue if the towns start going away, which I can see actually happening. We've done, and Chief Honeke's done an incredible job of trying to figure out what would be the minimum number of hours that a town needs to contract with us, because, we can't just say, well, we want you for 1 hour only now, but oh, by the way, you're going to come and do all of our policing duties. We know our limits, and we know what our threshold is, and we decided to go by population base, and we figured out all those numbers. So we have told the townships what your bottom line is on numbers of contract hours. Now, of course, we're not setting the fee, but we are saying, these are your lowest numbers you can go to. Let's say Wanamingo had 6 historically for their population. They can go down to 5. That's still going to be an increase, of course, but it's just something that they have to think about. Belchester very well could increase theirs by 60%, I think. Are we close to that? 60% from last year to this year, so they may or may not stay with us. Those are just some things that I'd like you to think about, but to be honest, we have to really get those contracts to our cities. And I would, if we can, do a 3-year contract, so we're not back here every year.
So Sheriff, if they didn't have the contracts, or if they canceled the contracts, then would they create their own police department?
No,
Oh, all right.
they would essentially be like a township. They would get township services from our office.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there a state statute that's saying municipalities do have to provide their own?
Unless you're a chartered city, which there's only a few in the state, and one of them is Minneapolis. We don't have any chartered cities, I believe, in our county.
Well, Brad, I mean, I agree, and Wanamingo and Pine Island are here. They're my districts, and we've talked, quite a few times on it, and I am so torn because I have 7 townships that I go to also, and they say, we want you to be fair to us, and you say values, and, how can I say you need to pay more so that we can provide this service? And looking at the other towns, a police force is extremely expensive for any community. I mean, way more than what we're charging here. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
So I'm extremely in a bad spot. I just, I want to do everything I can for my, representatives, but I got like 9,000 people in my area. And where do you draw that line? Where do you say, okay, Wanamingo Township and Cherry Grove Township, I guess you should. Yes, that 5 hours a day that Wanamingo is paid for, having that officer in that community does give an advantage, Kenyon at the same time, their officers will respond also, so we're not paying anything for that. So I'm frustrated. I'm torn with it. Really am. Comments?
I don't have any comments.
My only comment, as I said before, this still doesn't cover the actual cost of the officers, so I'm not sure how we dump it onto our cities who pay for their own. So I think it's low. I didn't necessarily support it in the past, but I will support it to move it through because it's better than what we're getting, and we should not put this burden at our cities. Again, I have Goodhue and Belchester that are going to have to pay this if they're going to do it, but how does a citizen of Belchester, I'm in a township, how do I look at it and say, you should subsidize my policing? When I look at the cities of Lake City and Zimbrota, they're paying for their own. So I will support it. I still think it's low.
Well, I'll make a motion to accept the contract as written by the Sheriff's Department.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Passes 4-1. Thank you.
Can I just ask a clarifier?
Okay.
Is that with the 3-year contract?
Yes, the motion was for the 3-year contract.
Thank you.
For your information, staffing report. Canyon Cleanup Day, any comments on that, Jess?
As the board may know, we conducted our first Kenyon Cleanup Day per the board's direction. The event was aimed at collecting transfer-type material, not demolition. So we collected things like scrap metal, tires, appliances, furniture, and electronics. And we had a total of 16 customers over the course of from 8 to noon on that day, which was very light. We received no tires and no scrap metal. So it was very lightly attended event, widely advertised.
And you do have 4 more scheduled, so,
Yes, yep, it's one every month at the end of the month. And they're all at the same location, same time.
all right.
And we'll accept the same materials at each one of those.
Just a question, Jess, compared to household hazardous waste, which seems to be really, really well attended. I mean, I've been there when you've sat in line to get through it. Same kind of advertising, same kind of, I mean, and probably even more advertising. Really well attended, and it'll be interesting to see the next one. And if the next one is like this, I'm not even so sure that we should continue, because this is not at all any kind of cost effectiveness.
We'll bring more information on that first event and the second event at our second meeting in August, so I can give you a bigger breakdown of costs and kind of where we're at with everything. The difference between HHW and one of these events mainly is that the HHW events, people are dropping stuff off at essentially a $0 cost. And these events we're charging for what they're dropping off, very similarly to what they were doing at the Wanamingo demo landfill. They had to pay for all these things. Nothing's different in that regard. So I don't think that necessarily brings people to the events versus some place that you can drop things off for free. But that would be about the only difference.
Thank you. Project status report. Introduction of Human Resource Manager Lance Koenig.
Yeah, we have hired Lance Koenig as the third Human Resources Manager, and maybe Lance, if you want to come up and just say a few words about your background.
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
You have to turn.
Lance Koenig, the new Human Resources
Turn it
Manager.
on.
Come to Goodhue County with almost 15 years of human resources experience from organizations such as Apple, Hulu, Walt Disney Company.
Mike, underneath in the,
The button on the bottom.
There we go. Is that a little bit better? There we go. All right, let's start this again. Howdy, y'all. Again, Lance Koenig, been just started here a couple weeks ago. I come with almost 15 years of human resources experience from organizations such as Apple, Hulu, the Walt Disney Company, and Berkshire Hathaway via Cannon Equipment in Cannon Falls. Very excited to be here. This was such a wonderful opportunity to be able to provide support and partnership to Goodhue County employees and, of course, our community and those who support them. So very excited to be here, very excited to be part of this group. I moved from Texas about 1.5 years ago, and Minnesota has treated my family and I very well, and can't wait to be here for the foreseeable future. So thank you.
thank you, welcome.
Welcome aboard.
Hoping to get him a real winner this winter.
New and old business. How about committee reports?
I have one.
Go ahead, Linda.
Actually, sorry, I should have backed up to new and old business. Well, so my curiosity is whether or not we could put together a survey for the public, because I'd really be interested in knowing whether or not the citizens of Goodhue County, the types of things they support or prioritize. So, like the parks, possibly Nielsen being one of them. Broadband. Are the townships willing to contribute in any way, shape, or form if they really want to get broadband everywhere? So I listened a little bit to the BEAD workshop yesterday, and they're talking about 26, 27 is when the rollout would be. So, I mean, that's quite a ways down the road. We've talked about the money that we do have for broadband, trying to link it to either the Border grant or the BEAD grant. But if that's coming out in '27, that's a long ways down the road. Or the transfer station, is that something that people in the county want to put money into? But I mean, I'd really like to know from the public, what are their priorities? And if the public doesn't want us to, the county, to spend money on broadband or a transfer station or parks, then I think they're telling us where they want their money spent. At any rate, that was my question as to whether or not that's something that we could do if anybody else cares.
We did a survey at the fair last year or 2 years ago, Mr.
Not very many people.
Priorities?
Yeah.
Not of the priorities. Something that I could speak to that's a little bit more relevant. We just pushed out a survey and we concluded it was about the communications plan. And that information will be coming down to you within probably the next 2 months, so you'll see all that data. But something that we had been noted, we actually received a letter from a constituent regarding that communications survey. And in that survey, we had asked for people to rank topics that they were most interested in, just to hear from the county in that regard. But this individual was concerned with the framing of the question and the topics that we had provided. They thought that we didn't list taxes as an option, and that person was very upset that we hadn't listed taxes as a specific option. And so they felt that how we had phrased and how we had provided the topics ahead of time, they didn't feel like it was providing a broad ability for everyone to actually comment on what they did want to hear from the county. So we can do a survey. That's more than possible, and that's easy for us to distribute. But I think we just need to be careful on how we phrase it, because we don't want it to sound as if though we're trying to set an agenda ahead of time. But instead, if you're wanting to hear directly from the public, we probably want to leave it a little bit more open and broad and more of kind of a open comment feedback, if you will.
Well, even if we had a list of the different things between transportation, broadband, park, and or all the other things, but then ask people to just list their top three. So, I mean, if taxes was number one for me, then I could list my top three.
I think it might be interesting to list your top three and your bottom three, and it doesn't mean that the board is going to act on that, but it's nice to know where people are coming from. And I wondered about ways to improve the response rate. I wondered about that. And I wondered I think everybody gets a truth in taxation statement. And I wondered if, the survey with a link to filling it out online could be there. And then if people wanted to mail it back, they could mail it back. Because I think people look at those. And so I think we'd increase the percentage of people participating if we linked it to something they were familiar to looking at.
So during our communications planning, we had met with each department individually, and we actually had asked that of the finance department as to what the rules and regulations surrounding sending out additional material with those tax statements would be. Also the truth and taxation statements. And they had told us that there were 2 statutory requirements limiting what we can send in addition to those. So it's not like the city that can send out inserts with the utility bills, for example. I'm not sure what those 2 things are. It's escaping me at this current moment, but I don't think that this would qualify for those, but I can check back in with finance and follow up. If you were to proceed with a survey and wanted to list topics, we'd probably need to get you guys to approve of those topics before we pushed out that survey. So that way, if constituents did have issues, they could reach back out to you and you guys could hear directly from them.
Yeah, good.
Chair, I think this would be a good topic maybe to do some work on and then possibly have the board talk about it at your January workshop. One of the things I would caution you a little bit about is not just throwing out hey, a survey, are you interested in these things? Because just as an example, and I don't have photographic memory, but most of the things you mentioned are not in the 2025 budget. So if we're already concerned about the things we've seen that might be in the 2025 budget, we probably shouldn't go ask, hey, do you want to add more in there? At this time, we probably want to be careful on how we frame a survey, make sure it achieves the board's intent before we ask for other things that would add to the levy. Because as we can see already, just from the budget and capital discussions I've been involved in the past few months, there's not enough budget to do what we need to do. So
but if we did find out there wasn't much interest in parks, so do we not invest that $200,000 in parks?
We might, but just going back, well, let me reference this, and this is well before all of your time, but on the board anyways. But one of the surveys we did with an outside organization was basically what are the commissioners and management team's top priorities within the budget. And one thing that survey said is that economic development was our number one item. And our least funded item was economic development. So that's where I'm saying we got to be a little cautious in creating citizen expectations that we don't have the appetite to levy for. Because we may find out that people really want more parks and trails, or they do want a huge solid waste campus on the west side, or all these other things, but that we may not have the appetite to levy for.
Yeah. And my guess is people will have things they want, but they won't want higher taxes.
Yep.
So I think the survey would also have to ask, what things would you cut? And that doesn't mean we'll cut them, but I think it's important to know what the citizens actually want.
Yeah, and that's why I think we need to do some prep work before we
Right.
just throw a survey out there.
Right, right.
But I think it's very valid, a good idea to have one. So, but my suggestion would be to have Briggs and some other people put some work into it and then talk about it at our January workshop.
That's fine.
Favor of that?
That's fine.
Any other committee reports? Claims?
Move approval.
Motion to pay the bills
Second.
and second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carried. I'll look for a adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Thank you, everyone.